Welcome back to my channel. On this week of Freaky Friday, we're going to be talking about the most prolific serial killer in the world, Blood Countess Erzsebet Bathory. Historians believe that she killed and tortured over 600 girls in her time. Erzsebet Bathory is a Hungarian countess that was born in 1560 and died in 1614. So historians and scholars have a long-standing debate whether or not Elizabeth was actually this prolific serial killer or she was just a pawn incriminated by her family and enemies. So located in Hungary's capital, Budapest, is the extravagant Bathory Castle. And in 1560, Erzsebet Bathory was born into the super wealthy dynasty that controlled Transylvania, which is now a region of Romania. But being super rich doesn't make them immune to health issues. Elizabeth, since the age of 4, suffered from epileptic seizures. Back in the day, they didn't have the best remedies for things, okay? It was believed that the blood of somebody who's unafflicted from epilepsy placed on the lips of the person who is afflicted by epilepsy would be a cure, and they would do that every time there was like an epileptic episode. This marks the beginning of Elizabeth's thirst for blood. And during this time, it wasn't unusual that people of high status were really abusive and would mistreat their staff. So Elizabeth's upbringing was essentially drinking blood and brutality. And at 13-year-old, she married 18-year-old Count Ferenc Nadasdy. Count Nadasdy was from a wealthy Hungarian family as well, and they were also super influential at the time. They ended up marrying and having 4 children. I'm just going to say that together they had a super toxic relationship. Nadasdy was very enabling and almost an educator of torture for Erzsebet Bathory. He guided her and enabled this side of her. And they eventually moved to Western Hungary, where he essentially taught her his ways. So along with her torture-hungry husband, she was raised by an uncle who taught her Satanism, and then an aunt who brought her to orgies, brought her around witches, alchemists, sadomasochists. I don't know how to say it. I'm just going to leave the word there because I really can't pronounce it. And just to further set the vibe, her husband also built her a torture chamber with her specific specifications, okay? And it's really gruesome to say, but her victim demographics were young girls. And most of these girls were handpicked because they were poor. During this time, it didn't really matter if someone from a noble family ended up killing somebody from like an impoverished family. It only really mattered if a noble person was killed. And because of this, no one at the time really cared, really. So that's why a lot of these victims disappeared without a trace. As a gift, her husband got a small girl, placed her in honey, tied her up, and let her be ate alive by insects for the pleasure of his wife, for Miss Elizabeth. So her husband also made her a glove that had all these claws attached to it, and so then she would slash her servants anytime they made a mistake and they messed up. She would slash them. How messed up is that? So some other means of torture that Elizabeth would inflict upon her victims, she would put pins and needles in between the nails of her servants. She even would bite chunks out of them, and at one point she even had a girl eat her own flesh. In the year of 1604, when her husband died, things got a lot worse. She got really into it. But people started to catch on, and local families started hiding their kids and not letting them work for her anymore. So this ended up being the start of her demise because she started outsourcing young girls. So now not just peasant girls weren't safe. Any girl, noble or not. So finally in 1610, an investigation began because girls are missing. There's been like weird accounts of random body parts and limbs being discovered. It's just been a whole mess, okay? And they're finally catching on. But now this is where the other theory begins to play its role because the investigation was led by Matthias II, the King of Hungary. And Elizabeth was under suspicion of killing 80 women. So this other theory, right? She was a pawn, so they say. Why? Well, let me tell you. She was a rich girl. Her husband died. She had power, she had influence, and she had a cousin who also shared her name and potentially similar interests. Now, if she were to team up with said cousin, they would then have more influence and power over the king. Also, her kids, the son-in-laws specifically, they were trying to cash in. They were trying to cash in mama's wealth. So that's why historians and scholars are divided on this. Either they exaggerated these stories to make her look super guilty so they could snatch her money and take her power, or she actually did kill these people, all 600, or both. I don't know. It's really hard to say. I wasn't there for it. They coined her the Blood Countess because she would bathe in her victim's blood and paint it on her face, hoping that she would live forever. I wanna be forever young. That's the song that she would sing to herself because she would bathe in her victim's blood and paint it on her face, trying to have eternal youth because that's what she thought. And I think it truly probably stemmed from similar beliefs with the epilepsy and putting the blood on her lips. She's also believed to have inspired the book Dracula. She was the original vampire, the original worst prolific, torturous, murderous serial killer ever. Allegedly. Don't come for me, Elizabeth. What if it actually worked? What if she is alive? What if she does have eternal youth? She's watching me now. She's a vampire somewhere. She's looking good. Oh my god. So even though the Blood Countess and her late husband could not be convicted of these crimes, you know who was? Four Bathory servants. And if you think about it, it does make sense because they needed help. She specifically needed help, especially after her husband died. She needed help getting the victims, disposing of them. So they were committed against violent crimes against young women. And Elizabeth herself ended up carrying out the rest of her time alive in a very spacious jail, so they say. And she later died in 1614 at the age of 54. And for another century, nobles lived in this castle, and you can go visit it to this day, which I might have to go pay a visit. But what do you guys think? Do you guys think that she's this bloodthirsty vampire countess? Or do you guys think she was this powerful political threat that needed to be extinguished? I personally believe it's probably a mesh of both. I think that she probably was a prolific serial killer, just, you know, going with the theme of that time. It really makes sense, especially because a lot of these people were kind of going crazy, you know, with the inbreeding and all that type of thing. So that kind of lines up. But she also, I mean, it's plain as day, she was a political threat. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about that. So it probably was like a it was probably like a kill two birds with one stone moment for the king. He was like, okay, she's kind of scary and she's also kind of politically scary. So let's just wrap this up. So that's probably what happened. That's my theory because I'm such a educated historian and scholar. But anyways, guys, I had a lot of fun researching this one, and I hope that you guys found this story super interesting. I had heard it way back when, and I really didn't know all the details until recently, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is kind of scary. So if you're into that stuff, I highly recommend to go do some digging because I definitely left out a lot of gruesome details that I didn't want to get in trouble for on YouTube. Well, that's going to be it for me today, guys. I hope that you guys really enjoyed this episode of Freaky Friday, and I'll see you guys next week. Thank you for watching.